I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He's the author of several books, no other than Miss LL Stevens.
Yay! Hi, and I am LL Stevens. Yeah.
Yes, welcome back, Miss Stevens.
Thank you.
And can you please again introduce yourself?
I am a writer of epic fantasy novels. I also write science fiction, some erotic fantasy and fiction, but I publish that under a different pen name. And I love to write. It's what keeps me out of trouble. And I am putting forth right now an epic fantasy series that I've been working on for decades. It's complete, and I am publishing them now in order. I'm now on the third book. The fourth book is coming out early next year.
Ah, that'd be awesome. So that is not trilogy, it's a series.
It is a series of 6 books. Like I said, they're all written, but I'm editing them and making them more consistent and better and polished and putting them out one by one. Yes.
That'd be
But,
awesome.
yeah.
So you are writing erotic to or steamy novels?
No, not anymore. I
Oh,
wrote
not
I
anymore.
wrote several. It's a sad story. One publisher went out of business, which they do sometimes. Small publishers, indie publishers, and then the other publisher just decided not to pay me anymore. And so I took the books away from them, which because that's a breach of contract when they don't send you your royalties. But I have not put them back up online. So none of my fiction that was written that way, the erotic fiction, is available anymore. It's all out of print. But I did write several novels of that type, a few series and things. And I've written some science fiction novels in the past also, regular mainstream science fiction novels.
So what is the big difference if you're writing steamy novels and sci-fi fiction?
Well, there's none really. It's just the sex. If there's sex in it, it can be steamy, and if you have enough sex in it, it's soft porn. So there's a continuum from
Yes.
sweet romance to steamy romance to soft porn to hard porn. So you can write anywhere in this erotic continuum. They do pretty well. People have a taste for that sort of thing. I like writing it, but this series of novels I'm writing now is not steamy. I mean, it has a few passages where people have fun, but it's not written for that purpose. You see.
Yes. So, before we go on to your second book of the series, let's do the recap of Ferdinand, the first book of the series.
Okay. That Sordanian is the starting point of the series because it starts with the main character who carries the series on his broad shoulders, and he starts as a young person. He's a teenager in Sordanian. He ends up at the end of the book. He's 21. He grows, and through the series, he gets older, and so do the rest of the characters. But it's his origin story, his coming of age story. He's God-born. He's different from humans. He knows he's different from humans. Humans know he's different from them, and they expect things of him differently than they do from other children, young teenagers. He has great expectations placed upon him to become the avatar of a gigantic transportation, but is it really a transportation system called the Rill, which is immensely powerful. And if he can channel it, he becomes immensely powerful. But whether he can channel it or not, and whether doing so will destroy him, is part of this weighty burden that's upon this young person. He meets and must deal with the enemy of his nation, someone who conquered his nation, occupied it, and who he considers his enemy. But he may be mistaken about the nature of this other man. And so the novel is his growth as a person, He grows in understanding. He grows in enemies. He grows in friends. Not too many friends, because he's really a jerk to deal with. But that's the story of Dorilion Sordanian, and that's the first book. It ends with a bang. He's born into this glittering, powerful empire, and something happens that makes it so that empire starts to break apart and crumble.
Yes, sounds interesting, Miss Steven. So let's talk about the second book of the series.
The Kheld King refers to Dorilion's rival, Stefan, who is the grandson of the man he thought was his enemy, and about whom the first book is all. That's their story. Stefan inherits a kingdom, and Dorilion inherits a kingdom. And these two are people who just never learned to get along. And the story takes place after the events that begin the disintegration of the empire. And it follows the collapse of this empire, how it happens, why it happens. Some of it is Dorilion's fault. A lot of it is Stefan's fault. And there's a third player, Namor, the villain of the series, but he's got his own story, Namor does, as to why he's the way he is also helping this process. He wants this empire to collapse. Dorilion and Stefan don't want it to collapse, but neither of them knows how to work with the other so that they can prevent the collapse. And so it shows how two powerfully willful people can do terrible things. And sometimes, so in the course of the Kheld King, Dorilion gets very damaged. He's betrayed. There's events that make him question a lot of what he thought he knew. Stefan, meanwhile, he finds himself in a position of power he's aspired to. But what does he do with it? How does he accomplish change in his kingdom in the direction he wants to go? And does he do it in ways that are damaging, or does he do it in ways that are healing? And so you see these two young men, they're both 21 at the start of the book. The book covers several years, but you see them struggling with their own personalities and also with the magic that's at play here. Namor's magic, the magic of the wall, which is a time-spanning entity that is in Stefan's kingdom and that he doesn't trust. Maybe he should, but he doesn't trust it. And some of the things he does because he doesn't trust it. How does that play out in his where this is such a powerful force? And then you have Dorilion with his Rill, his powerful transportation system that built this empire. But he learns to be very afraid of it because of things that have happened both in Sordanian and in this book. And he may have power, but can he even access or use it? So you see him learning to be an adult and to come into his own strength and his power.
Yes, very well said, Miss Steven. Sounds interesting too. How did you craft this second book of the series?
The second book, because of the way my series came together, I actually wrote it as a bridge book between Sordanian and the third book, The Second Stone, which was published just a few weeks ago. In The Second Stone, the events of the Kheld King had already happened, and I had already written The Second Stone and the other three books that follow it. So I wanted to show how you get from the end point of Sordanian, which is the massive event that has this echo throughout the rest of the series, and where Dorilion is at the start of The Second Stone, which includes some very key scenes. And so I crafted the book leading up to it. These were key scenes where Dorilion and Stefan conflict. There are key scenes where Namor and Stefan conflict. There are key scenes with betrayals that I had to make happen because they were referred to in later books. I had to make them actually come to life on the page. And it was such an interesting process. I think this is the book I found the most interesting to write because it's like, wow, I've got these people who I know existed before, but I can bring them to wonderful life. And I love Cullen Brodesson. He was one of the characters in the Kheld King, a decent person who could have had this immense impact, but what happens to him? Not every person who's wonderful and decent can necessarily have the impact on society that they should. How does this happen? And also, Stefan, what happens to Stefan is a very fascinating thing that happens to Stefan. So I had so much fun writing it, is what I'm saying. I wrote this history and these characters and their magic. Durillian learning magic it's part magic. You might even think it sounds like science, but it's not. It's definitely magic because he comes from this God-born race that has magic. They are magic. That's what these gods were. He's half God. And it's like, how does he learn to use it? And it's not always easy. You don't always succeed the first time. I know my first time cooking a crown roast, that was a lousy crown roast. So the first times he tries using the magic can be quite awkward. And I found it interesting to write those things.
Yes, definitely. So, the Kheld King, what behind the title of your second book?
It's about, because later, it becomes very important. The Khelds are a people. They're a rustic, they're called barbarians by the rest of society, but they're not truly barbarians. They're just not as developed. They're not the same. So Stefan's very proud of being a Kheld. This is part of his identity. So when he becomes king, he tries to bring the Khelds more into society. And he's known as the Kheld King because he looks like a Kheld. And his father was a Kheld. His mother was part Kheld. And so he's called the Kheld King. And so I have a tendency to name books after what they are about. Sordanian, it's about Durillian Sordanian. The Kheld King, it's about Stefan, who's the Kheld King. So that's why I came up with that title. But it is also so much about him, his psychology and his mistakes and his utter humanity in his blindness. Humans can be so blind, but we blind ourselves. We are our own worst enemies sometimes. And I want
Yes,
to write about that. Yeah.
definitely. So, the Kheld King, do you have a second option for the title?
I wish I did. I don't have a tagline for it, but it's mostly long live the king. It's a reign that was starting in hope. I don't really have a second option for the title. The tagline was long live the king, the Kheld King, which I know isn't terrific, but it kind of embodies the book. I liked the second title of Sordanian, which was Secret Sheathed Swords. And when I started signing the Kheld King, I came up with a tagline finally, but the book was already published, so I couldn't change it. But it was that swords kill secrets. And that's what happens in the Kheld King. Swords kill secrets. They kill things that they maybe should have left alive. Ideas, people, cultures. And so that would be my second title for the Kheld King if I were to reprint it. It would be Swords Kill Secrets.
Wow. So, are you the writer that is easy for you to name your characters?
Fairly, not always, and I do sometimes change names mid ride. I'll say, oh, better name, and I'll pop it in. Once a book's been published, of course, the name is forever. But it's not hard for me to name characters. I do use resources for this. Sometimes it just pops into my head, full blown, like Minerva from Jove. But other times I look up on a fantasy name generator to look at different cultures and their names and what names mean. Sometimes I use language lists. I have references for different languages that I use so that I can sometimes get names out of those, including South American culture names like Aymara and Inca, Quechua names, because I spent time in South America and I love the languages down there, but I don't speak them. But I do have dictionaries of the words. So I try to be respectful. So if I name a character, I try to make sure that the name doesn't sound like anything offensive or contrary to what the character is about. I try to name characters so that their names reflect who they are and also the culture they're in. So the Kheld name sounds somewhat more European, actually. The Staubound or noble people's names tend to sound Greek, ancient Greek. I used ancient Greek and other languages from that period to create those names. I try to make them fairly consistent within the cultures.
Wow, sounds interesting, Mrs. Stevens. So before we go on, I want to shout out to the people listening in Saudi Arabia. Assalamualaikum. Shukran jazilan for being part of my podcast. Most especially in Makkah province. I got 50%.
Hmm.
Thank you so much. Riyadh at 20%, 22%, Eastern Province at 17%, and no, Riyadh region at 6%, and the last but not the least, Mecca region at 6%. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast because this podcast is created to empower writers all over the world like Miss L. Stevens. Shukran Jazilan, Saudi Arabia. So, Mrs. Stevens, what is the best highlight of the Kheld King?
Oh, there's a few good ones. The appearance of the Phantom City of Mulsor, perhaps, trapped forever in past, present, and future. It has quite an appearance. But I think the best scene would be comes at the end. I can't spoil it too much, but it's a very um, sorcery filled death scene that it comes out of people go away, what the heck just happened, because
Yes.
it involves illusion, magical animals, and stuff.
Yes. So, what are the elements that you put in the story that make the readers glued to it?
People seem to be especially happy with the character of Durillion, who's quite a piece of work. He's an asshole. He's a jerk. He's arrogant. He's full of himself, but he's also very human. He's probably the biggest draw. But I think people also like the world building. This is a world where the everything was created by these gods, and then it got destroyed because of some of the backstory, which I have it on my website, that involved a god that got killed and his weaponry and his body was taken and dismembered and used, and eventually, though, they didn't completely destroy this, and so this god is still kind of sort of around and he's not happy. And I say he, but it's just a god, it doesn't have gender, but I use he as a pronoun for it. And the piece of the god is in this crown that Namor the villain has, and it starts to affect Namor immediately. This god is trying to get revenge on those who killed it and dismantled it, and to destroy the creation of the gods that killed it. So this world building plays out in various ways. There are god built cities that are amazing, super advanced, but they're so advanced nobody understands them anymore. But people use them and live in them. Permethidon, Sordan, and Mormantaloris. Mormantaloris is built on the side of a volcano. It has a magical bubble that makes it livable with breathing air, but it uses the volcano's power to create other magical devices and things that can be used. That's where Namor lives. And you have the transportation system, the Rill, which is not really a transportation system. It's a being. It's part God itself that Durillion is bloodbound to. He's attached to, basically. By the second book, he's definitely attached to it. And then you have Permethidon, which is the home of the immortal wizard Morenthro, who may well be one of the gods himself. So they're trying to repair this damaged, broken world. They've gotten it to a pretty good point, but now it's endangered again because things are falling apart. And I think people like that it's a world with fantastical elements, but so much of the characters and the people feel very human and real. We are humans after all, and that's how we behave. So.
Yes. And according to AJ, an excellent continuation of the series. So do you think connection of the book one and the book two is that great to compare?
They follow directly on each other. You literally go just in a matter of days from the end of Sir Daniel to the beginning of the Kheld King. It's a continuous story, even though the Kheld King does take several years. But yes, it's one big story, and in the end, the 6 books of the series will be one big story. There is a transition, here and there as characters die and get replaced and things grow. But it is one large story, and I hope that readers can follow along through the whole thing. It reaches quite an amazing conclusion.
Yes, and according to Althea, vivid characterizations and complex plot. So, how vivid the characters, Miss Stevens?
Well, of course, to me, they're very vivid. I live with them. However, I've heard from readers that they find them very vivid, and some reviewers have especially singled out certain ones, like Mark Frederick, the enemy king in Sir Daniel. A lot of people like him. I've had people reduced to tears by what happens to a certain character in Sir Daniel, and a death that surprised me, because it's like I didn't expect people to react so strongly, but apparently he was a very likable guy, and I try to make them real. They have flaws. They have extra, very sterling qualities, but they'll have flaws. Some of them are unlikable. I think because some people are unlikable. I mean, I don't like everybody I know, and I don't like all of my characters either. But
That,
I try to make them real.
yes, definitely. So, if you want to go back and want to revise the Cult King, which part of the book you want to revise?
If I were to revise it, oh gee. Well, considering I can't change anything that goes forward, that's interesting. Oh, what would I revise? I might revise to put in a little more of a couple of minor characters who become big later in the series. I tried to do that to a certain extent, but there's one character, Nalf, who appears once in The Kheld King, and I wish he appeared a little more. I think that if I could go back and revise it, might give him more to do. I'd create a role for him so that more to do, more page time, because I think readers are going to adore him later in the series, but they might enjoy getting to know him a little better earlier, if that makes any sense.
Yes, and according to Flower Lady, outstanding story. I think I like this the best. So, how do you comment on this comment, Miss Stevens?
Oh, I love hearing comments from readers, because I have no way of knowing whether this works or doesn't work. By this, I mean the story, the series, a character, a plot point, unless readers tell me, unless they mention it. I see it a certain way in my head. I hope readers see it similarly to what I see, but I really don't know. So when people point out, oh, here's how I felt, here's what I liked, here's what I didn't like, uh, that gives me impressive amounts of information that they either affirm that I'm on the right track, which of course we all want to hear, right? But it also can tell me, oh, okay, this is something I didn't expect, and maybe I can work with it going forward into the series as I edit these other books and try to make sure that that's addressed with the things they like, the things they don't like. Um, there are other things too. It's just like, it just lets you know you did a good job. It's a pat on the back.
Yes, yes, definitely. An inspiration to write more.
Absolutely. I mean, I write for the fun of it. I'll be honest. I would write whether or not I was publishing. I would still write. I've created so many stories. I'm not going to publish them all in my lifetime, I don't think. But I love it. It's so much fun. It keeps me out of trouble, as I tell my husband. This is keeping me out of trouble. It doesn't make much money, alas. But publishing, I publish it because I hope readers will enjoy what I've done. I did it. Look, I wrote it. But now I can have a chance to share it with readers, and I hope they enjoy what I've done.
So, do you think writing is one of your legacy.
Yes. At least some people will have these books after I am dead. So that is a legacy of sorts. I do hope that enough people enjoy it and love it that it gets talked about, in future years. Yeah, definitely part of my legacy. I mean, we have things we can leave behind us. We give to the world and we say, hey, world, look what I did. I did this thing. This is my
Yes,
thing. This series actually is the thing I think will be my writing legacy.
definitely. So the Kheld King, what do you think the flaws?
I don't know. That's a good question. I guess readers will tell me, right?
Yes, definitely. The reader will tell you. So they think that negative reviews make you better in the process.
Well, that all depends. I mean, if it's just a critical review, I draw a difference between critical and negative. Critical can be like, here's the criticisms I have of this. It was slow. I know a reader has said that the third book was a little too short. They wanted a longer book. I mean, things like that are critical, and those can be helpful. I didn't think this character came off the way the author intended, or, they killed off somebody they shouldn't have killed off, or whatever. That's critical. Then there's negative. And sometimes negative is just, I didn't like it, which is negative, but it's okay. But then there's people who are mean. They actually set out to say mean, hurtful, nasty things. And I don't know why they do that, but it does happen. I've had negative reviews on books. I've had mean reviews on books. Negative doesn't really hurt me. I'm just sorry I disappointed them. Nobody wants to disappoint a reader. I want them to take the thing and enjoy it and like it. But if they didn't, that will happen. Not everybody's going to like your book or your piece of art or you. That's just a fact of life. Not everybody's going to like everything. But then the people who call you the worst writer that ever lived and you should just give up and go retire to a convent somewhere or become a dirt farm. Okay, that's mean. And that's not nice.
Yes, true. Those are the bitter people that they are not satisfied even themselves.
Exactly, exactly.
They are trolls and they just want to make you upset and tell to the world that of course not. This is my inspiration to do lots of more books to come.
Exactly. I'm writing for the people who enjoy what I do. And I'm
Yes.
sorry I disappoint the people who don't enjoy what I do. But if you're just trying to attack me, go to town. I mean, you haven't lived till you've had a teenager tell you they hate you. I
Yes.
mean, your child. I mean, and that happens because that's life. Some people just, yeah, no, I don't need that. And
Yes.
like, okay, fine, you don't like me, good, go away.
Yes.
But but
You can.
I write for the people who actually are willing to give the book a shot. No, not everybody. Nobody
Yes.
ever has. I don't think anybody has ever made all people happy and love them. That just doesn't exist.
Definitely. So, um, before we go on, Mrs. Stevens, I want to invite you to listen to my other podcast, Food 101, on our third season with Chef Alessandro, one of the executive chef in one of the five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. Plus one more, I have this upcoming new podcast with Mr. Mike Lucas called Comedy 101. Okay, it's created to, empower laughter all over the world. We need to laugh, people, right, Miss Stevens?
Absolutely. Humor is important.
Yes, humor is very important in everything, especially we are facing lots of catastrophe right now. We're having climate change, we
Mm.
have lots of health crisis issue, obesity, diabetes. People, we need to laugh every day so that the stress will go away.
I agree 100%. I mean, I like humorous books. I mean, I actually seek them out. When I hear that's a funny book, I go, and maybe we'll purchase it. So I love that. I put humor in my books. They're not funny books. They deal with epic battles and epic societal changes and bad things. And people are very unhappy and grumpy in my books. But they are happy sometimes. And there is some humor. And I love to put the humorous parts in. And I hope readers will enjoy those moments too. Yeah.
So if you describe your writing, Mrs. Stevens, what are they or what it is?
Slightly dense, um, complex, because I tend to weave things together. This is a plots that weave together and characters that interact. It's dense, a little complex. I think my prose is good though, and I think it's you can follow it. I think readers will follow it just fine. It's I sometimes use a big word, but my publisher will say that's a big word, change it, and I'll change it to a smaller word. But they do, a few get through. And yeah, I'd say my writing is very vivid, imaginative, um, introspective. It's thoughtful and complex, but also fun in the long run. Yeah, fun.
Yes. So in the future, what else you can write aside from science fiction fantasy?
Well, I have written even a contemporary romance, but I don't find I enjoy it that much. I could write another one, I suppose. I might, with my husband, write a mystery or thriller. He likes mysteries and thrillers. He's a big reader, but he's not too much into fantasy and science fiction. But I could see writing a book with him that would involve a beach town in New Jersey and a death. We find a body on the beach, and the sheriff gets to, yeah, I think I will write that book with him.
So have you read the book Crawdad Sing?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, I recommend you, Mrs. Stevens. Like
Oh,
a
okay.
mystery thriller, and it's one of a kind. It's really until now. I read it like 2 months ago, and it's still now it's
Oh.
haunt me.
Oh, well, if it stays with you, that's a recommendation. I love books that stick with you.
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
I will look it up, definitely.
And your trilogy will be on my list this month. I want to read all of them.
Oh, I hope you like fantasy. I hope you'll enjoy it.
Yes, definitely. I'm gonna enjoy it. So the Kheld King. What else you can say about it?
I think it's a book that people will really enjoy, especially if they've read Sordanian. I think they can read it without reading Sordanian, although, you miss the whole backstory of Durillion, but it kind of explains what happened in the first chapters so you can keep up, or else start there. I think they'll fall in love with certain characters. And there's some pretty. I think they'll find the characters interesting, like Durillion's grandmother, Ermenthalia. She's a piece of work. There's a love interest. Durillion does get laid, uh, but it's an interesting relationship. I just like following the characters and seeing what they do with each other, how they approach romance, how they approach having to make major changes in their societies. And also, I think I like the found family aspect of the Kheld King. I think people might not expect to find it, but they do. There it is. Durillion has a family. He's never even sired a child, but he has this family of children, two children that are his kids. He considers them his kids. He calls them his children. And Sordanian explains one of them, but the other one is explained in the Kheld King. I like seeing him with children. You see a very powerful character, and he's immensely gifted, but he's pretty good with kids. And it kind of like, I don't know where that came from. It came out of nowhere. And it lends a lightness and a certain sweetness to his character that wouldn't exist otherwise. And that surprised me, and I think readers will enjoy that too.
Yes, definitely. So do you think the Kheld King is good for a series or a motion picture?
Yeah, it is. Even more than Sordanian, it's a very visual book. A lot of very visual things happen. The city of Mulsar, the Phantom City, the cities of Sordan and Permephodon, which are huge and yellow, like God built. You've got the city of Gignasta with its waterfalls and its Vermilion Aqueduct, and then you have battles. You have fights and battles and war, and there's also the pomp and circumstance of the courts. It's perhaps the most visual so far. I say so far because there's more books coming of the two books, and it's just a great book that way.
Yes. So, Mrs. Stevens, can you please invite our listeners to buy all your books?
Please buy all my books. I need to make enough money to publish the rest of them. I just also hope truly, if you buy the book, I hope you enjoy it immensely and pass on, talk about it. Uh, it's available everywhere: Amazon, Kobo, Barnes and Noble. If you want to buy it, it's my publisher, Forest Path Books. If you buy the paperback, you get a free copy of the ebook, but only from my publisher, Forest Path Books. But it's available everywhere. It's available in many libraries. I have, if you live in the Springfield, Pennsylvania area, look at some of the little free libraries. I put books, I put copies of the books in those little free libraries. So yes, find my books and read them, please.
Yes, people, let's support Miss L.L. Stevens because if you support her, for sure she will give her best and more books to come. So, Mrs. Stevens, thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate it, Daniel. Thank you so much for listening to me chatter on for all this time.
Thank you for your time, Mrs. Stevens.
Thank you, Daniel.
Moricon people, see you soon.